Multiplayer gaming has exploded in popularity in recent years, especially with the advent of the internet and online play. No longer do games confine multiplayer to just you and a few buddies that have to be in the same room. All you need is a username, an internet connection, a console or a PC, and away you go. Multiplayer has become so prevalent in modern gaming that now many games must include some form of it or face horrible sales. But what happens when those servers that run these games go offline for good? Should they forever be consigned to history, or should there be legal allowances for people to preserve their playability? On this episode, we discuss the battle for gaming's past and what it might mean for all gamers. Next on Downloadable Content. Welcome to Downloadable Content. I am Brian, and with me we have Ron.
Hi, everyone.
And Doug.
Welcome back, guys.
Just us three on this episode. We bring it back down after having the great big behemoth that was Chrono Trigger, and also the Sony Part 2, the PlayStation Part 2 episode. So, back down to a smaller group, but no less fun for that. But we are going to be talking about the current dispute going on between the Entertainment Software Association, or the ESA, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation, known as the EFF. But before we dive into all of that, just want to remind all of you out there on the wide world of the internet that Downloadable Content can be found on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher. You can find all episodes there. And if you want to get in touch with us, if you have any comments, questions, or you have ideas for episodes or want to be on an episode, you can find us on Facebook.com/DLContent, at Twitter at DLContent, on Tumblr, dlcpodcast.tumblr.com, and of course you can always email us, dlcontent1@gmail.com, and so there you have all of the different ways to get downloadable content into your ears. And take that as you will. So, away we go, gentlemen. I came across this article. The inspiration for this article came from something I had read on Polygon. The article, this news came early April, so here we are now in June, so a little more than 2 months. But the issue in question has to do with gaming's past, and just to start us off, I am going to quote the article directly here. The EFF reached out to the U.S. Copyright Office asking for, quote, legal protection to game enthusiasts, museums, and academics who preserve older games and keep them playable. The EFF is arguing that the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which passed in 1998, basically creates a legal difficulty that, because that piece of legislation allows things for DRM and a lot of measures that publishers do to prevent piracy, makes it hard for people to modify games to keep them working after the servers they use are shut down. So, before you get going, I'll put that in layman's terms for the wide world of the internet out there. Let's say, and again, right from the article, let's say you own a gaming museum or even just a large personal collection that has historic value. When a publisher shuts down the online servers for one of your games, you may want to hack the console hardware in some way to allow it to continue being played. In this way, online-only games or modes wouldn't be lost forever. But according to the EFF, this technically isn't legal, which is why it reached out to ask for a specific exemption.
Yeah, it's such a weird issue because, I mean, on one hand, I get the whole anti-piracy angle of, if the game's accessible to someone, you should be able to go out and, buy it. But at the same time, if, the servers are shut down, and you want to try this game, it's, your SOL basically. And that's always kind of one of my reluctance, like, to try any sort of game that's, like, requires you to be online. I'm like, well, I don't always want to be online. I want to sometimes just go in and play a game and kind of cut off from the world for a little bit. And it's frustrating because I think we're seeing this more and more with technology as stuff gets, updated more and more. The previous, technology isn't available anymore. I mean, I still hold on to all my old consoles because I don't have any other ways to play these games. My Super Nintendo might be a little dusty, but I can still go play any game I want and that I've previously owned, whether it's, whatever. Even if it's not on the virtual console, I still have that game that I can still play that I physically own. So it's tough because no one wants to shut down their servers, but at some point it's not economically feasible for the company to keep maintaining them.
Yeah, this also applies to like MMOs and PC games too, because for MMOs specifically, there's a lot of older MMOs. Like Ultima Online and
is EverQuest still alive? Because I know that was
maybe, I don't know.
I know that was
that was a big one. That might still be alive. I know there was an EverQuest 2, but I don't know if that's still alive.
It is okay. I just took it up. Take a look at from Lord Wikipedia here. 16 years this game has been going.
Yeah, I mean, like,
it's still alive.
Yeah, and there's an MMO called, I think it's Tabula Rasa.
Yes.
That like that game, like, there's a pretty vocal fan base, and they wanted to like have private servers so that they can play on them, but they can't because of legal issues with the creator of the game and the studio that made it. I'm trying to remember what the exact issue is with them.
Richard Garriott, who designed Tabula Rasa. The developer was Destination Games. It was made by some of the creators of Ultima Online.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think one of the more interesting angles about this is, they say, talking gaming museums, so to speak. And that's kind of we're not going to get into our video games art soon, but it is sort of thing that, you always wanted to have that, kind of go back, see the beginnings of stuff and see earlier work, because it does influence, where we are now and will influence stuff later on. And if you can't access that resource or that reference, it's a lot harder. I mean, I think, once again, just talking technology, you look at, say, what Good Old Games has and all that stuff. Nobody really has a floppy drive anymore on their computer, so you can't really install some of these old DOS games, on your latest machine. But it's, you still think, a lot of people still think, oh, these are some of the classics, or these are kind of where we came from. So I think kind of in the preserving aspect of it, I do think it is really important, but it's kind of the hard part is kind of where do you draw that line? Because, if you're a company, when do you say, okay, we're going to start shutting down, and but someone says, "Oh well, I'll take over managing your these servers." What sort of legal right do you have? Do you go for the person who's going to pay the most to take it off your hands? You just going to take whoever demonstrates it, or do you go for someone who's clearly more of a fan and is going to kind of treat it well? Because I think that's kind of the concern I always see with this is, well, if it gets keeps getting sold, what if eventually it's just this one company starts hoarding everything, and it's an exorbitant fee just to play one game. And at the same time, I'm always reluctant to look at the model of, why am I paying for a game I've already bought? And that's always the frustration part for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association, basically replying to the EFF by saying, no, that's piracy, and anyone who tries to to do that is they're hacking and they're pirating. Basically, they wrote to the Copyright Office in reply saying that, quote, permitting circumvention of the access controls on video game consoles will increase piracy, significantly reduce users' options to access copyrighted works on video game consoles, and decrease the value of these works for copyright owners. I kind of find that as a bullshit argument because, alright, we are all, at least most gamers that I know, despise the idea of DRM. Because most video game publishers, or, well, let's not, sugarcoat it, EA is probably the worst offender when it comes to DRM. For example, Mass Effect, and I use this game a lot as an example. Mass Effect requires an internet connection for you to play, even if you are playing single player. Because EA put in on this game, EA or BioWare, somebody, made it so that every time you turn on Mass Effect, it needs to dial home to EA's servers to say, "Hi, we're a legit copy, let us play." And if you don't have I had an instance one day where my modem was out for some reason, and I wanted to play Mass Effect. I wanted to resume my single-player playthrough of Mass Effect, but it said, nope, you can't do that. We cannot access EA's servers. You can't play this game.
Yeah, and that's the shit that drives me up a wall.
So, take a game like Mass Effect or any other very popular franchise. I'll use another one that EA butchered the shit out of. The Sims.
SimCity.
SimCity. Okay, I thought it was The Sims. It was SimCity. Okay, thank you for the...
Yeah. It was SimCity because I remember this, too, where game came out, and EA said, don't worry about it, there's not going to be any server issues. Game came out, guess what? There were server issues. People couldn't play. It would be laggy. Things wouldn't save properly.
They couldn't get in, some of them.
Yeah, someone couldn't get in for like days on end because there were so many people trying to play the game.
So, so I'm like, okay, eventually, EA is going to stop running the servers for Mass Effect. So, how the fuck do they expect anyone else to play the trilogy? Say you just shut down the servers. No one can play anymore. You have basically consigned Mass Effect to history, and the ESA is saying, "Oh no, you can't do that. That's piracy." Well, if EA has shut down the servers and they're no longer making any money off of this, what the fuck does it matter?
Yeah, and I think really that's the bottom line. Is I look at this as like, okay, when we talk about piracy, it's like, okay, you're stealing a new game that you could go out and buy. No problem. That's, I think, so many people, use the justification of, say, piracy is like, well, I'm getting something that I would know, wouldn't otherwise have access to. And like, especially like with older games, it's like, and I mean, I realize this is rationalizing it, but if I'm getting a classic game, going to download it or whatever, because I can't get it anywhere else, it's not like I'm unwilling to pay the money. Like if someone told me tomorrow, oh, hey, here's this classic game, you can go buy it for $5 online, I'd say, sure, $5, yeah, done. But if I don't have access to it anywhere, it's not like I'm keeping my money for myself. It's just, a lot of us would give that money to the proper party if it was available. But if we don't have the way to give payment, it's kind of like, what are we stealing? That we're not. Nowhere did we say, oh, I'm not going to pay the money. We don't have an option. And that's a lot of it with these online games, is there's no other alternative. If you give us a reasonable alternative, granted, some will be mismanaged, but if there is an alternative, we'll seek that out versus not being able to do it. Like you mentioned Mass Effect. If you have to connect to the server, your only other option is to not to play the game at all, and that's not what the consumer wants. It's not what we would rather play the game, and I think it's just, I don't know. It just seems very much like, okay, we're unplugging the servers. I'm going to take my ball and go home. And if you still want to play this game, well, that's nice. Screw you.
Which is why I do not have any sort of moral objection to emulators.
Mm-hmm.
I have an emulator on my computer. Yes, NSA, you can go after me. Hi there if you're listening. Because again, like, I have an emulator to play old games that I either don't have the console for or have no way of obtaining the game. Mm-hmm. And as I've just stated, my opinion is that if a company is no longer making this game or no longer drawing any income from the sale of this game, what does it matter?
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of not drawing any more income. And here's the thing I often wonder is like, okay, so the company shuts down, but they sell off the copyright. And then there's going to be somebody who's just holding on to that copyright because they want one day to be able to find a way to make money from it, which seems, not going to deny it sounds greedy, but it's also the same, like, well, if they're just sitting on it and not doing anything with it, it's frustrating because you see this all this time, and even beyond games, is people just sitting on these copyrights, hoping that someone will do it, and the only way they get the money is like, oh, well, hold on, you're doing something with this property, even though I'm not, but I hold the copyright, I'm going to sue you, and that's how I'm going to make my money.
That's called patent trolling, and if you watched Last Week Tonight a few weeks ago...
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking of, and it's so just infuriating. And, I mean, the other thing with this article is they talk about, museums, and that's a cool idea, especially, like, I mean, it's harder to do with, like, consoles and PC games, but, like, arcade games, these are people that are very much preserving these classic games so people can still not only look at it, but actually still play the old games, and that's incredible. But I think, especially as we get into kind of just a couple generations ago, it's not the same as sit down and play the game for 10 minutes, whatever, to go through, like, even a Super Nintendo game, like some of the Final Fantasies and stuff like that. You're not going to be able to do that in one sitting, and that's the kind of thing is So you want to be able to access it and go through it and play with that. And in MMO, yeah, you still need a community there, but there's still a lot of extra stuff out there. Even if you're playing solo, you still want to be able to kind of explore the world. And, you know, it's once again just kind of closing it off, and then to bring it into like other media. It's basically all of a sudden, you know, if you're a library, you're just taking a book off the shelf, and now no one can read that book. I mean, it's not a perfect example, but that's kind of how I view that as. If you deny people to do it versus saying, oh well, I need to clear shelf space on this library. I'll give it to another library so they can do it, and that way, it's still accessible. But I'm still, I have room for the library I'm running for the other projects that I want to focus on.
I think this also affects like arcades too. Like there's an arcade in Chicago called Galloping Ghost Arcade, and there's a bunch of like actual arcade cabinets in there that they maintain. And I'm looking at like their list of games right now, and they have over 400 games available. Now, not all of them are available to play at the same time, because sometimes the cabinets break down and they have to repair them and things like that. But you just pay $15 and you have access to all the games in there for however long you want to spend there.
Wow!
And it's just like what would happen if like they could like. I mean, I saw them. They have a repair shop. Like most of the things they have there are like pretty easily seen. You can see them repairing like some of the cabinets, and it's just like, what would happen if they couldn't get the parts for that, or they couldn't repair anymore? Like those games are gone. Then.
Yeah. Have either of you ever been to a Fun Spot in New Hampshire?
Yes.
that place is amazing. But yeah, I mean, it's the same sort of thing where it's, for lack of a less corny phrase, it's an interactive museum. You can still play all these games, and they actually, I forget the exact name but I think it was something like Death Wish or Death Race or something, and it was this really old black and white game that they managed to restore, and they actually have like documented stuff of like how painful it was to get everything up and working again. But it's that same thing of, there's ways to do it. I mean, there's that documentary King of Kong, where they're playing at Fun Spot because it's where they can get to kind of the old arcade cabinet for Donkey Kong. And I think it's a really neat thing to kind of look at it as, and this is the history geek in me, is being able to, it's one thing to read about the events and stuff like that, but it's much more being able to kind of play it out and experience firsthand. And I think that's a big deal. And yes, Ryan, you just sent me a Wikipedia link. This is Death Race was the game. Yeah.
And I remember I went to Fun Spot, and it was like heaven. I had walked in there, and it's like, Ron, this is in the Guinness Book of World Records. It's the largest arcade on the planet.
Yeah.
It's 4 floors, and I don't think there's anything in there newer than like early 90s.
Yeah, it's the thing for Galloping Ghost. So they have a couple cabinets that are like quote unquote recent. They have a Street Fighter 4 and what's the Killer Instinct for the Xbox 360 or Xbox One.
Yeah.
And like for those ones, like they have set up as a cabinet, but like we saw them like actually open up the cabinet because the power went out and they blew a breaker on one of the sections, and like a quarter of the store went dark, and so they had to go in and manually restart the cabinets for Killer Instinct and Soul Calibur. Like they basically just have a PS4 or an Xbox One hooked up to a monitor, and just have the arcade sticks all hooked up into it.
And we're talking about these older classic games. I mean, the thing about a lot of these older games, the arcade cabinet style games, is that many of them are already currently preserved. I don't know if any of you have checked out the Internet Archive, and you can play a lot of these games in browser.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these do exist and are, luckily, they're preserved, and the code for these games are so simple that, I mean, as I just said, you can open up an internet browser and, play to your heart's content. The challenge is with newer games that require online servers. We do have people, we have, there are gamers out there who, make their own servers. And that's what the EFF is trying to get this exemption for. Because right now, I mean, the DMCA says, what these people are technically doing is illegal. And having read both sides, the written materials for both sides, the ESA to me comes across as an organization that seems to think that everybody is pirating games.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing with EFF is they came. It wasn't like they were hunted down for doing this. They came to the people saying, "We want to do the right thing. We want this exemption because we're trying to do it right." And that's the thing that's really frustrating to me is they're getting punished for wanting to play nice, and that just seems so counterintuitive. And again, it's the kind of private server thing, and I guess it's like, okay, you hook up a server and say, okay, my 20, I want to make this successful to like my group of 20 friends, and you ask them for to chip in a little bit to run the server. And that's, I guess in that sense, it's like, well, you're making money off our thing. It's like, well, yes, but at the same time, it's not stealing your profit. And I think that, once again, that's kind of where I go back to is, in my mind, there is a difference between, making money off the idea, and I think that's kind of fair use, versus stealing someone else's profit. They're not. If the company that maintains the copyright is basically not making the money anymore, they're not stealing their profit, because it's not money they are actively pursuing. And I mean, intellectual property law is insane, and especially as we get further down in this, in the digital age. But it's sort of that thing of like, I don't know, if you were like, if you had a farm or something, and like all of a sudden you're not growing anymore, but I am starting to grow carrots and sell them, and you had a carrot farm. Well, you're not growing them anymore. You're choosing not to maintain that income. I'm not stealing your money. I'm selling my own carrots, which maybe that's a really bad metaphor, but that's the best I can think of.
Were you playing Animal Crossing?
Actually, believe it or not, I just finally started Mass Effect.
I think a better analogy might be you have a small little garden that you use for like growing your own plants and things like that. Mm-hmm. And one day you maintain it, you keep it for a couple of years, and like you find it pretty tasty, your friends say it's pretty tasty, so you figure, hey, maybe I'll go to like a free market air thing for like 1 or 2 days and like see if I can't sell anything there. And you do that, but then like some like other person who like they make their living off of it, or like selling at the free air market, like get pissed and like knock your cabbage patch off or whatever, something like that, because you're cutting into their profit.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm talking to gamers who actually want to be farmers. Is
Well,
what is,
I mean,
is,
well, hey, we play The Sims, we play Sim City. I mean, we play Animal Crossing. All we want to do is just watch our stuff grow, so we can blow it up usually. But
next I'm gonna find out that both of you spend hours per day playing Farmville.
oh, screw that game. And it's also like I remember this happened too when I believe it was Halo 2. Bungie and Microsoft announced that they were going to close down the servers for Halo 2, so you couldn't do online play with it anymore. And people were like, the fans were so outraged by that when they went to close servers down, people loaded up their Xboxes, played Halo 2, and kept their Xboxes on in the online lobby. And it took them like an extra week or two before they could actually close the servers down.
And
that's a brilliant protest, but
it is a brilliant protest. And you know, right there, for example, Halo is no okay. There are people who do play Halo for the single player, but Halo, I think, is more well known for its multiplayer. It was so, you know, when you take that away, then what? People still want to play Halo. Just because Microsoft or Bungie stops running the servers doesn't mean the demand for the game has vanished.
yeah, and that's exactly it. Is, you know, kind of sliding the people who want to play. I mean, and it's kind of like you know, maybe it's steadily declining, but when do you say, okay, there's not enough people playing to maintain it? Because especially as games get older and stuff, not as many people are playing it, but the people that do really are, you know, are diehard fans, or they're the people that said, hey, you know what, I haven't played this game in a while, I'm gonna plug it back in. And then it can be very jarring to be like, oh well, so much for that idea, so much for reliving my favorite days playing this game.
And, you know, I just find it very, very strange that video games, of all of the different types of media out there, that video games have to go through this gauntlet. I mean, I don't typically hear, and, you know, if you know, I'm wrong out there, internet, just let me know, you know, this sort of uproar over preserving music, or books, or old, you know, television shows, movies. You know, we have dedicated archives for all of these. Why can't video games have an archive of their own as well?
And I'll throw it back at you, though. I think it's honestly, it comes back down to technology. You know, we all still have our CD players, and, you know, you buy that, but all you need is the equipment. You just need the media, like say we're talking music, just the CD or the tape or whatever, and the device to play it on. And those are both what you own. But you still need that for a video game online, you still need that third point of, the online access, and that's kind of that you're still relying on that third party to be able to play it. I mean, like we're saying, you know, older video games, you don't have this problem because you don't need to connect to anything. I mean, there are still those games that you will play no matter what because you don't need that. And I think that's the issue is you're trying to, when you're basically, as they're saying, hacking the game so you can still play it online, you're trying to kind of create that own third party and jerry-rig a system to make technology work. And it's once again, the hard part is figuring out why. You know, why are you just not letting these people, you know, have access to their fun? And it's like, it's not harming anyone, it's not stealing anybody's money, you know, and it's like you've for lack of a better term, you've abandoned the product, so you clearly don't care about it anymore. And that's to me the issue is, I would rather see, I don't know, like, I'm blanking on words, but I just want to see people just be able to access it, and I think it's just a thing that we're seeing it with video games because they are all digital versus pulling another piece of media off the shelf, so to speak.
Someone correct me on this. Is it Library of Congress that does like an every year they announce like 2 or 3 movies that are like culturally relevant and must be preserved?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but yeah, Library of Congress does that.
Yeah, and like they do it for music too, and obviously they do it for books because like it's called the Library of Congress. So and we've had, and the article even mentions that it's the ESA, right? The ones that the ESA says like they helped out with the exhibit at the Smithsonian about the art of video games.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there's some motivation here for like, I mean, yes, there's a debate about whether video games are art and whether they need to be preserved, and I'm of the opinion that they are art and they do deserve to be preserved. But like, there's obviously like evidence already that happened from the Smithsonian, of all places, that says, hey, there is something going on here that we feel is important in some fashion. So how long is it going to take before we get the government to, for all of its problems, to step in and say, hey, you guys cut this shit out. There's actually something going on here that is relevant and culturally, in a cultural sense, and deserves to at least be written about and preserved.
Yeah, there is an attempt to get Library of Congress to kind of preserve video games, but it's so convoluted and stuff like that. I remember, and part of it is having the means to play them and things like that. I gotta dig out the article. I'm trying to remember what it was.
Ron, you were thinking of the National Film Preservation Board. They're the ones who select up to 25 movies each year that they deem culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant to the Library of Congress.
Yeah.
So, yes, and this was created by an act of Congress, the National Film Preservation Act. That's when the United States government went, we have, a long traditional and historical history with motion pictures. Maybe we should let these films, be forever preserved so that, we can, so they don't fade into history, so we can have people, be able to watch these, forever.
Yeah, because this would have been like probably during the 50s or 60s when it passed.
It was the National Film Preservation Act was passed in 1988.
Yeah, so that's
almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, almost 30 years ago, and by and large, let's say movies began like in the early 20th century. So
that's almost like 80. That's like 80 years before.
Yeah, and they're dealing with 80-year-old film reels.
So
like that's pretty difficult to preserve as is.
Yeah, and I think the two things, kind of the counterpoints I'll say there is, but once again, the technology for playing film hadn't changed that much, where video games keeps changing. How many console generations have we had?
But keep in mind, but for me, like, it's because of what the video game media is, in that by and large it is all digital, it's all zeros and ones. It is going to be easier to preserve because of modern day technology compared to how it was back in the late 80s and early 90s.
If you break it down to just kind of code, yeah. But I mean, the thing that I think a lot of it is, I look at this as like the preservation of video games, as that we're having this discussion, is kind of the growing pain of the medium. It's, we're trying to figure it out, and it's not easy.
I mean, for me, it seems pretty easy. Like how many games you made for the NES? At least 200. And I think if you get like all the games for the NES, it's like you can have all the games for the NES, both the ones that are translated into English and the Japanese only and the European onlys and what have you. They fit onto a flash drive easily. I'm pretty sure you can get all of the NES and the Genesis and this SNES onto like a 20 gigabyte flash drive. Like, it's not that big. And you can have an emulator there too to run it, so all you need then is just a computer to play it.
Yep.
And it's just for more modern day games, yes, it will be an issue. Or it'd be more of an issue just because of how large modern day games are, but even then, as technology grows, like what's to stop us from saying like maybe 5 years down the road, like we're gonna have like 20 terabyte, 30 terabyte, 50 terabyte hard drives. And like that's, if you have that much space available to you, it should be pretty easy to like have the games be saved.
Yeah.
And just from a data standpoint, not even from like a playing them standpoint. And obviously we want to be able to play them though, so you would need to have like an emulator or a console of some kind to play them.
Yeah.
In answer to your statement, Ron, there are a grand total of 826 NES games.
All right.
So you were off by a few hundred there.
Yeah, but so 826 NES games, and
that includes all of the titles for the Famicom. So
yeah, so let's be generous here and say on average it's 5 megabytes per like game. 5 times 826. That's 4,130 megabytes. Divide that by 1,024, because it's 1,024 megabytes for a gig. It's 4.03 gigs for every single NES game. That's not that much. And
I definitely, yeah, and like I said, I think we are going to reach that point where preserving them, it does become important. I just want to see more of the, okay, we've preserved it, but I still want to be able to access it.
Yeah, and that's where we need to get like some more discussion on, is that we can preserve it. We obviously have the technology to do so, but now how do we let people play the games that are preserved? Do they have to go to an arcade? Do they have to go to a museum? Or is this the thing of like, you pay $5 and get access to the entire archive?
That would be incredible. Like, just basically go through and have access to that and stuff like that.
But
I mean, it's so frustrating sometimes. Like when you no longer you have a game you want to play and you can't because however things change. I made the mistake a couple years back. I finally caved and said, you know what? As a kid, I always wanted Super Scope 6, and I was all excited. And I got it, and I put the game into my SNES on my nice new flat screen TV that doesn't work with light guns. And it's just like, it's one of those, there's so many pieces to the puzzle. And, to go back to the online aspect of it, I think that's another really big part of it is how do you maintain it? I mean, sure, okay, maybe we can create some form of exemption for a museum of classic games and things like that. But, so it's like, okay, a private server running there, sure, cool. But what about the fan back? That doesn't help the fan back home who still wants to play this game at their leisure and things like that. So I just, like I said, the more I think about the issue, the more it's like, it seems so much like, why are you being antagonistic to people that just want to enjoy the game and they're not doing it? I hate to say it, but there's no harm being done. So why get upset at them? It's live and let live, so to speak.
Basically, one more stat for you, Ron. I just took a look at the storage capacity of the NES. The highest storage capacity for the console itself was 1 meg.
Yeah, so maybe my 5 meg thing was for the SNES.
You were.
I was being real generous. Okay.
Wow.
Even then, you get my point. It's just like it's very easy to save the older games.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, 1 meg was the max, and almost no games hit that limit. So when we saw what we thought as kids a visually stunning game like Mario 3, most games were less than 1 meg. So there you go. But yeah, so yeah, you probably could fit the entire NES library on a single flash drive, and no one would be the wiser. So, be that as it may, I think this is a good time to cut to break. So on our second half, we will continue this discussion. We've been talking about physical games for this first half. But what about games that are only available digitally, like indie games? We'll talk about those in the second half, but in the meantime, you'll have some music, as is our usual custom. You are listening to Downloadable Content with myself, Ron, and Doug. We'll be back. Welcome back to Downloadable Content. We are all still here. Ron and Doug have not been legislated out of existence.
Not yet, at least. Connor is still debating that.
I don't. I don't want to get into a long-winded discussion over Congress. It's too painful.
The idiots on Capitol Hill, yes, we know.
I'll just leave that to people like Jon Stewart and John Oliver and all of them fun-loving souls. So, back to the discussion at hand here, talking about the EFF and the ESA and their little legal brouhaha. All of this stemming from a provision in the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which, like many laws that are written and passed in a hurry, are usually loaded with flaws. And this law was written at a time when digital music really started to become. It was really evident that music and movies were taking that next step into moving away from purely physical format and moving into digital, where there was a genuine concern about people pirating stuff. I mean, we all know of the early pirating software like Napster and Kazaa and sites like that, programs like that. So that's where this law stemmed from. But in the drawback is that when you run into a situation like this where we have people who have very genuinely good intentions. They don't want to do any sort of piracy or anything like that. All they want to do is make it so that this game remains available and playable long after its publishers and developers have abandoned it. And because of how the law is written, that makes it very hard to do. So we've talked about given our thoughts about physical games, but now I want to turn our attention to games that are only available digitally, and that's the province of many indie games out there. It is impossible to obtain a physical copy of these games because no such medium exists. You need to have either the console or a computer to not only obtain these games but be able to purchase them. Now, a lot of these games don't have the DRM restrictions in place that companies like EA does, because most of these studios are they're in the title. They're indie studios. They don't have copious amounts of resources, times, or great big legal teams that can do all this sort of stuff. So the only way that you can get these games are digitally. So now another layer of difficulty comes into play. How do we go about preserving these?
It's going to be difficult just because of both the uniqueness and actually my words are failing me here. Due to the unique situation of what the indie games are, generally speaking, they're a small studio or individual who makes a game, and it gets sold to a small audience, whether it's your friends or family or a small fan base or something like that. Now, there are a couple indie games that did do very well. For example, Bastion, Transistor, most of those games you see on Steam, as an example, and they do fairly well for the company. But that still leaves the issue of how are you going to preserve it once it gets pulled out of main circulation. I don't know how Steam handles that in terms of how when do they decide to pull a game from it being able to download it through the Steam or being able to buy it off Steam, or even if they do that.
It might be a decision where the developer, tells Valve in this case, pull it.
Yeah. because it's costing them too much to keep it maintained on the Steam store or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you have probably the same sort of thing for like the Google Play Store or the App Store.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure it's, the company pays a fee to, hey, keep our our game up there, and then if they're not if they're not making any money off of it to keep up the fee, it's then again, why keep it up? And then even a company that's as big as Steam saying, if no one's buying it, why are we keeping it up here? They have to, they have limited amount of bandwidth that they can use, so why kind of keep it up there?
Yeah,
and that's the tough call again.
With a case of a digital, an only digital product, there is no physical thing to preserve. At this point, it's literally all code.
Mm-hmm.
Which, with the way gaming is going, with more and more games going to digital only, that I think adds another layer of another way. They are still just as valid and important to preservation. I mean, obviously not right now because they're new. In the history of video gaming, indie games, purely digital only games are the newest thing. So, I mean, we really don't have a problem yet with preservation, but eventually they will. Eventually they will. I mean, like, maybe the indie developer shuts down. So, we may get a situation where, for as great a game as, say, Bastion is, say Supergiant ends up closing, well, there may still be, eventually, there may still be people who want to play it, but can't. So I think that preservation is also just as valid.
Yeah, and it's once again that tough issue of, you want to make it accessible, but if no one's able to play it, and no one's gonna really argue that that's a worthwhile game to check out, and I just I also kind of wonder about the day when, say, Steam itself disappears.
Yeah. Valve closes up. They says we can no longer afford to have the Steam service running.
It's going to be a very sad day.
It'll be like the stock market crash.
Basically,
it's going to be like that.
Because I mean, especially because Valve has become basically. I mean, obviously there are many places to get indie games. I mean, it's not just Steam. I mean, you have Humble Bundle, you have Desera, you have GOG. But Steam, the Steam client by far is the biggest. Most indie studios make their bread and butter off of Steam sales. So,
yeah. So it's another one of those things that I don't have a really good answer for. But
well, why not?
If I was, I wouldn't be, living where I am. I'd be a lot richer. But I mean, I would love to see, someone be able to create, kind of a games preservation project, something like that, where, especially with digital stuff, maintain it and, keep a way of saying, okay, these games aren't accessible. I mean, Good Old Games does that to an extent. I mean, and they keep, their library just keeps growing and growing. And there's some great old things to play there. And they're one outlet, but Unfortunately, the best thing about digital distribution is it makes it a lot easier to give to everybody, because now they don't have to go out and buy a physical disc or something. They just go download it. But at the same time, it also makes it harder to preserve because it's only digital. So it's kind of the double-edged sword of you get more it's more accessible until something else happens. So it's a tough thing to run around, and especially with indie developers, they a big company like EA, they're still going to put it out in physical format and the day one digital, which people absolutely love, and that's I understand, hey, it's nice to not have to take up shelf space, but I'm one of the people that still likes getting the physical game. But for other people, for an indie developer, they don't have the budget to, send it out to print and put it on shelves. That's what makes them kind of indie. So,
Yeah, I mean, and there are games out there that I would love to, eventually, when the day comes that April and I do have Spawn, like, here, this is what I played.
mm-hmm.
I want to.
This is what I was playing when I was your age.
Yeah, and this is if I'm going to subject my 4-year-old to a video game, it's going to be Super Mario Brothers, because that's what I started with. But
yeah,
be that as it may, but I mean, eventually I want to have them play games like Bastion, like Battle Block Theater, like Mass Effect, and I want these to be able, these games to be playable without the need for an internet connection.
Yeah.
Without the need for DRM. I don't think it's right that video games that, you have the ESA basically saying, no, don't preserve them, no, it's piracy, no. Like, no. It's like, we're not trying to swindle BioWare of cash. We just want to be able to play the game long after BioWare moves on.
Yeah, and that's the fine line that a lot of people need to kind of really look at, is the difference between piracy and preservation.
Well, apparently the ESA can't seem to tell the difference. So,
No.
I mean, obviously, they're looking out for the publisher. They're looking out for the money. I get that. We are a capitalist society. But at the same time, to basically say that the idea of even preservation, to be able to play these games long after these servers are gone, constitutes piracy, I think that's a little bit of a misguided argument. I mean, okay. I just pulled up the archive.org, which is a lovely, lovely site.
Mm-hmm.
Archive. That's actually where all episodes of downloadable content are based out of. I upload them there and then tell iTunes, this is where the file is, now go. They have the Internet Arcade, and it's hundreds and hundreds of games that you can play in your web browser. I'm looking at the main page of the Internet Arcade now, and I'm seeing games. You can play Street Fighter 2 in your web browser.
And that's cool, like I said, but the browser is so weird because it's still not the same experience. Like, and I think, like, I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier, which is to be able to, play a longer game. Something pick up and play, sure, no problem. But I think you're going to see this, especially with RPGs or as games, even in FPS. It's gonna be they're taking more time to play, and it's not something there you can just kind of get up and go. And so, I think that's where you really need to look at how are we going to still make this accessible, because you can't just finish it in one sitting.
And, well, I mean, also, and I had a thought and it just went away. Hold on, it'll come back. It's just like, there's going to be the day when we cannot play all of these Steam games anymore. I mean, there's going to be a time when there's no such thing as PlayStation Network or Xbox Live, and all of these games, in theory, you won't have access to anymore. I mean, I would like to think that, somewhere along the way, there's someone is going to, it might be illegal, but somebody might say, let's not let these games, go away.
Right.
I mean, there's MMOs out there right now that I know of that people have private servers for them, even though the actual servers are still up and running.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and like they do it just because of the fact that they want to either play with a close-knit community, or some people are particularly ambitious enough in that they actually balance the game out on their own compared to what the actual live servers are.
And do you know if they've been handed like cease and desist letters or anything like that? Like, has the publisher or anybody gotten wind of that and say, hey?
I do not know if they've been given like a cease or desist letter, but to my knowledge, they're still up and running.
Okay.
And like, it's definitely something that like they can do. They just need to, like, I think they need to, as long as it depends on how. I think for this particular MMO, it's all depending upon how the studio does it. And basically what they allow, like, is it a case of once you own the game, you can do whatever the heck you want with it? Or is it a case of once you own the game, you have to play on our servers, you can't touch anything on it? Or what have you?
Which is, again, another interesting thing to bring up. Because with these games that are currently playable through servers now, the argument that gets mentioned is, well, I bought it, therefore I should be able to do whatever I want with it.
Yep.
And, I'm taking a look at some of the replies to the original Polygon article that we mentioned. It's just that, no one is trying to. I don't understand the ESA's huffing and puffing about this. All somebody wants to do is make a legal exemption to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. The fact that somebody is trying to legally say, we don't want to do any piracy. We just want to preserve these games, and the fact that the ESA is getting all uppity about this, it just seems like a bit of a knee-jerk reaction.
No good deed goes unpunished.
Well, yes, if you're going to throw out cliches, that would.
But and I think the other thing I think is this law was written in the 90s. So
yeah, 98.
So that's getting up to, I hate to say it, that's almost getting close to 20 years old.
Uh-huh.
Things have definitely changed. And I think I think the challenge is going to be finding the way to write that legal exemption that works for, okay, private use or whatever, but doesn't create piracy for new stuff. And again, it's that line, I keep bringing back to it, but it's that line of, for me, is, are you stealing someone else's income? And if you're not, I say no harm, no foul. And I think the intention there is that, that we don't want people stealing the games. And that is a perfectly valid point. But if it's otherwise inaccessible and you're not doing anything with it, and you have no reason to hold on to it, why sit on it?
Yeah, I mean it's that same reason why I don't see any sort of real problems with emulators for older games. I mean, hell, You know,
I'd love to get like someone who has actively studied intellectual property law with us to just kind of, tell kind of explain it better, because I think there's probably something that we're not thinking, but I'd like to at least figure out what that is.
yeah, I mean, if we have any law majors out there on the wide world of the internet.
Sorry, my brother's on his honeymoon.
Well, so it'll have to be the it'll have to be well, to bring up another question, and this is a response. Reading one of the comments because they bring up some good points. Somebody is asking, well, do these companies want their games archived in the first place? Which is actually a pretty good point. I mean, obviously, a video game company is in it to make money. Do they want to even have their games subject to preservation, or do they legitimately want the game to go away once it stops making money for them?
If I had to guess, I would say that they want the game to kind of go away because they want you to pay attention to the new game. Because, and I guess that's kind of the argument of, well, they're stealing the money because it's like, well, people are still obsessing about this, but, hey, check out this new thing. And if no one's paying attention to that, then you're stuck.
Well, that's a very capitalist reply. That makes me sad.
It makes me sad that I thought of that, but I mean, that's the reality of it. Is if everyone's playing the old game, no one's going to pay attention to the new one.
Well, the thing about us as a collective breed is that we like here we are. I mean, the three of us, we're in our late 20s, in our 30s. So it's like we've grown up. We are the generation that started off with no technology, and now we have all the technology. So it's like we remember playing these classic games. We remember playing Pac-Man and Mario and the original Donkey Kong and Zelda. And, we remember these games fondly, and we want to keep them around forever. And, I brought up examples from Nintendo, and Nintendo, they keep doing it. I mean, we keep getting rehashes of these games, so, I mean, they keep throwing these games out there for people to buy. Oh, Super Mario All-Stars? All right, don't mind if I do. All right. This is why I love the Virtual Console so much.
I mean, and like, the Virtual Console is great for games that you either no longer have for whatever reason, or in some cases, stuff you've never played.
And the thing about the Virtual Console is that once you purchase the game, it is downloaded to your Wii or the SD card in your Wii or Wii U, and it is yours forever. You do not need an internet connection to play those.
Nope.
So I think, now if Nintendo could just change their policies to make it so that once you buy a game, it's yours, and if your system gets lost or stolen, you can re-download it.
I sense some bitterness here.
I'm waiting for Nintendo to finally going off topic here, I'm waiting for Nintendo to finally drag themselves into the 21st century with that whole, you buy it online, it's yours. If you lose or break your system and need a new one, you've already purchased this game. Alright, re-download it, no charge. Sony does this. Microsoft does this. Steam does this.
Yeah.
Nintendo's like, nope, you lose your console. Sucks to be you. You have to re-buy everything. No It's why I'm never getting rid of my Wii.
I honestly did not know that, but which is upsetting, but I mean, once again, the Virtual Console, that was what finally got me to buy a Wii.
Same.
Yeah, it was. I mean, granted, I I didn't have a GameCube, so I wanted to try some of those games. And I didn't, there was stuff coming out for Wii that looked interesting, but for me it was, wait a minute, I can, pay $5 and play River City Ransom or something? Sold. And that was a big deal to me. Because I'm finally, able to try some of these games or play these games I never owned or lost the cartridge for or whatever.
And I think, as I said, I think the Virtual Console gets it right in that, once you buy these games, they're yours. You do not need an internet connection to play these games. I don't know for absolute certain for the PSN or the Xbox Live. I'm talking about the older games, like the ones, but I think if we have to go with the current legal ruling, if we have to go with what the law currently is, and I think that might be a good way to go about it, is to just make these games available for, a small fee, and make it so that, once they're yours, they're yours.
Yeah, kind of the good old games model.
Yeah. So.
And I think I just want to see. For me, I want to see more options for places to do that, and maybe it means that places like Good Old Games also need to start looking into, okay, how do we do this for games that require an online component?
Yeah.
And I think, and it means altering the game, so it's like talk to our company's servers, not EA's servers, but that doesn't strike me as a lot of work.
It doesn't seem like it would be that much of an infrastructure problem to be able to preserve these games long after the companies that made them abandoned them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure
it's a patch.
And I'm sure that there are people who are listening to this thing who are probably thinking that we're complete idiots because they're already doing some form of it. I mean, yeah. Ron already mentioned that there are people who are running these online games on their own private servers, separate from the main servers. So it does exist.
Yeah.
We're not talking. This is not some sort of brainstorming episode where we're like, I wonder. No, it already exists. Now, all the EFF is doing is trying to make it legal.
Yeah.
And I think the ESA's opinion that, no, piracy. No. I think you're being a little heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little. I mean, again, we have no problem with film. I mean, we have an act of Congress that allows movies to be preserved because they realized, hey, there's historical and cultural significance to them. Which, now that I think about that, that would also require a shift in thinking in this country. In this country, we still think that video games are largely kids' toys.
Mm-hmm.
It's, they're not, like, quote-unquote ingrained in our culture the same way that movies and music and TV are. That people... So we need a generational shift in thinking as well. We need more people to realize, wait a minute, video games are also historically and culturally significant.
Yep. And I think it's the growing pain.
And I think you're right. I mean, video games as we know them today, they're only, a little more than 45 years old. So, in terms of history with media, video games are still the baby of the group.
Yep.
So, that's... And I think eventually I think it's going to happen. I think eventually we're going to have people in positions of authority who go, these things should be preserved. I mean, we're already seeing it. I mean, we see preservation of, say, for example, old comic books. I mean, I don't see DC and Marvel howling at the door, with pitchforks and torches, demanding that nobody be able to preserve the older these older comic books.
Yeah, and instead they're looking for ways to. It's once again instead they're figuring out ways to make stuff accessible, because you can't have that old physical copy. You know, I would love to be able to just have a copy of Amazing Fantasy number 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man, right, that I can read in. But you know what? That thing's over 50 years old. It's not going to be a thing. But they have, they have the Marvel Unlimited app, where it's like you spend like $9 a month, and anything older than 6 months old in there from them you can read.
So with this particular app, just out of curiosity, can you go back and read these earliest comics?
Yep.
So they've scanned them in. They must have scanned them in.
Exactly.
Nice.
And it's I love it. But I mean, it's a great aspect, and it's making it accessible to everyone, and at the same time, they're still making money off it because you pay a subscription. But that's a pretty good thing, yeah.
So yeah, I think eventually I don't think it's gonna be anytime soon. We're gonna reach that point where somebody goes, video games are also historically significant, that they need preservation, and I think it's gonna reach that point. Again, it'll take a generational shift in thinking away from, oh, they're just for kids. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if in Japan, they've got archives of these things, out the ass, because video games are, I get the sense, never having been to Japan, I get the sense that video games are a much more important part of their culture than they are here. But I think of the three of us here, there's only one of us that's actually been to Japan, so...
Sorry.
Did you get to see Miyamoto in his cryogenically frozen...
No, unfortunately.
So, I think we have reached the end of this episode. I think we've come full circle here. So do we have any more final thoughts to say? I know, Ron, you've been a little quiet.
I've been a little quiet, but I mean, to me, I feel like this should be like a common sense issue. It's like, people like video games, but the technology and the hardware for them will not last. Therefore, we should find ways to preserve them or allow people to continue playing them once the hardware fails, by means of either emulation or private servers or what have you. And so long as there's no, you're not making a profit off of it, I don't see why there's such an issue over this.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the consensus of the three of us, but unless anyone else unless, Doug, you have any more thoughts you want to share?
No, I mean, that's probably... Once again, I just say, if it's no harm, no foul, if you're not stealing anybody's money, live and let live.
So, the three of us seem to be in consensus here, but if you out there on the wide world of the internet have anything else you want to add, or you are in disagreement with us, you can do that too. Don't worry, we do accept differing opinions. We won't bite. At least I won't. Ron might, but I won't. It's you can get, again, in touch with us a variety of ways. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts on this episode or any other episode, Facebook.com/DLContent, Twitter @DLContent, Tumblr dlcpodcast.tumblr.com. You can also email us at dlcontent1@gmail.com. And as always, all episodes of downloadable content can be found on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher, so they're all there, all 5 years of downloadable content for you to listen to if you want to take a few weeks out of your lives and binge listen. You can do that. It's up to you. You're all adults, I think.
We hope.
We hope.
We say some naughty words occasionally.
Oh no! Not that. Not the dreaded explicit words. So, all it does, wow, that was grammatically correct. All it remains for me to do is to thank Ron and Doug for being on this episode. Once again, I am Brian. Have a good one, everybody.